I don't have anything at the top, so let's get to what's on your mind.
Can you bring us up to date on what this building, what the Secretary is doing in relation to developments in Egypt? I do realize that their foreign minister resigned, so he doesn't really have a natural counterpart to get in touch with, but has he been making any calls from the plane?
Well, let me say first broadly, and I know Patrick talked about this yesterday, that our focus is, of course, on being in touch at the highest levels, both on the ground with our ambassador and staff in the embassy, but also at the highest levels of government here. And you all saw, I'm sure, that the president spoke with President Morsi yesterday, and the White House put out an extensive readout of that. I do have an update for you that the Secretary did speak with the Foreign Minister. I understand what the public announcements recently have been, but he is the appropriate counterpart. He just spoke with him right before I came down to speak with all of you. He conveyed the same message that the President conveyed to his counterpart, which is that it's important to listen to the Egyptian people, that we are, he reiterated what he said, what the President and others have said publicly, that the U.S. is committed to the democratic process in Egypt and does not support any single party or group. He stressed as well that democracy is about more than just elections. It's also about ensuring the voices of all Egyptians are heard. He also reiterated what our goal is, which is a peaceful, stable, and prosperous Egypt. That's what we're all focused on.
I mean, in what capacity was the foreign minister speaking? Do you consider him to be, even though he's resigned, you consider him to be a representative of the...
Well, Matt, I would refer you to the Egyptian government for his exact status, but I did want to just provide an update that the Secretary did speak with him.
But he is aware that the guy resigned, right?
Yes, that he has seen the public announcements, of course, but again, we're in touch with at all levels of government with counterparts there.
Including people who are not in the government anymore,
Again,
apparently.
Matt, I would refer you to the government of Egypt on that.
Okay, can you elaborate a little bit about what he meant by being important to listen to the Egyptian people?
Well, he was reiterating what the president has said publicly and what was also in their readout, which is that this is democracy is about more than just elections. It's about ensuring that people can have their voices heard peacefully. Of course, is always the goal. And he, you saw that the president urged President Morsi to take steps to show that he is responsive to their concerns, and the secretary agrees that that is an important step for the government to take.
Can you give us an idea of what kinds of steps these might be, recognizing that you don't dictate, or you're not trying to dictate, or maybe you are trying to dictate, but you certainly don't want to be seen as dictating. But what kinds of things does the U.S. think that Morsi could do to be responsive to the Egyptian people's concerns?
Well, again, Matt, I think what we've seen there is people expressing their points of view, and allowing them to do that is an important step. That's just part of that process. We know that democracy takes time, of course, and what we're seeing happen in Egypt is that transpiring over time. In terms of what specifically he can do, he can respect the views of the people. You also heard the president, or saw in the readout of the president's call, that there are concerns about violence. There are concerns about violence against women, and putting an end to that is certainly a part of a step that can be taken on the ground.
Well, does that? But I mean, the protesters want Morsi to leave. They want him to step down. They want him out. Is that the kind of step that you see that the U.S. thinks would be good? Do you think that Morsi should step down?
Well, Matt, I think we've been very clear on the Secretary's call to the Foreign Minister, as well as the President's call to the President, that we're not taking sides in this case, and that it's not up to us, the United States, to make choices here. Our commitment is to allowing the democratic process to take place. It's never been about one individual. It's been about hearing and allowing the voices of the Egyptian people to be heard.
One of those steps, perhaps something that's been reported that President Obama has asked or urged President Morsi to call early elections as one way of sort of appeasing the crowds.
Well, I have seen that report. I can tell you that is inaccurate.
How so inaccurate? Could you tell us exactly? Because it appears that the United States obviously is not trying to tell President Morsi what to do.
That was me.
But
Sorry.
but they're saying that he has to figure out a way to end this crisis, and that one of them would be to call new elections. Isn't
Well,
that-
the reports that we have been urging early elections are inaccurate. Certainly, there have been calls for, again, as I mentioned to Matters, I stated a little bit earlier, for allowing people to peacefully communicate their concerns, allowing people to protest in that capacity, urging the respect for democracy. Those are things that have been called for both publicly and privately, but I was referring to that specific headline that Joe mentioned.
All right. And then you said also that one of the things that the U.S. is looking at is the concept of democracy is more than elections. What does that mean exactly?
It means that respecting and hearing the voices of the people over the course of time, not just putting your ballot in at the when that occasion presents itself, but also allowing for freedom of speech and encouraging that year round.
On that point,
But let's just do one at a time. Go ahead, Saeed.
on this point, you still consider Morsi to be the democratically elected president, correct?
Well,
There's
again,
been no change.
that is correct. It's not about one individual.
Right.
This is about the voices of the Egyptian people, and that's what our focus is on.
In other words, rumors calling on that suggested there was a call on Mr. Morsi to step down are not true up until now, correct?
I think that the readout of the president's call and what I just read out of the secretary's call make very clear what has been communicated.
Forming a government, a coalition government of all the different political parties, like an emergency government, would that be a way forward, at least for now?
Again, I'm not going to get ahead of where we are in the process. We're obviously in very close contact at all levels of government, and that's where our focus is at this point
And
in
lastly,
time.
we know that the president warned against a military coup. Do you know that if the SCAF, the Egyptian military, responded or promised that they will not conduct a coup?
I don't have any update on that for you. You have to talk to the people on the ground.
Specifically on that, though, our understanding is that the Obama administration is warning the Egyptian military that if they were to carry out a coup, they would be at risk of losing U.S. aid. Is that correct?
Well, again, that's way ahead of where we are in the process. There are conditions on aid, of course, that I know you're all familiar with, but our focus right now, our focus today, as you can see by the calls that I've read out of the last 24 hours, is on communicating what needs to happen and what our concerns are directly to the government.
Certainly
and
right
others.
now, the military are basically saying that this may be one of the only ways that they can restore some type of order to the process. They don't necessarily want to have a coup per se, but they may be the only ones who can really go in there and bring about some order. What does the United States think about that?
Well, we've certainly seen their comments, and I know they've set deadlines. I'm just not going to speak to those or speculate on deadlines that they've set.
My question is, I want you to make it more clear about on which side the United States on now.
Neither side.
Okay, yeah, because yesterday the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, they used the Patrick statement as it's that the United States is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood and supporting President Morsi. So I wanted you to make it more clear, and I want you to tell me what are those red lines if if it's crossed in Egypt. The United States would have to choose one side to support.
Well, again, you're ahead of where we are in the process. We're on neither side. We're on the side of the Egyptian people. We have been in touch with all sides, the opposition, with the government, with the military, and we will continue to be. But to alleviate any concerns or assumptions, we have not taken sides. We are not on any side. The president communicated that. The secretary communicated that, and I don't think it could be any more clear.
What are your biggest fears?
When you say that democracy is was it democracy is more than just elections. It suggests, or to me, or perhaps I'm getting it wrong, that you're telling Morsi that he can't stand on the fact that he's the first democratically elected president of Egypt, and that actually he needs to, he needs to facilitate further democracy. And the way to do that, presumably, would be to call elections or to step down or to listen to the voices of the crowd.
Well, again, I think I've been very clear, and so let me just reiterate here that on these calls and also publicly, we have communicated that there's more work that needs to be done by President Morsi and others to create the conditions where everyone feels their voices are heard. And we've encouraged the government to reach out to opposition and work through to the opposition and work through the political process. And that's the stage that we're at now, and certainly more work needs to be done, and that's been clear in all of our public and private communications.
President Morsi is currently meeting with the military leadership today, I believe, and the protesters have appointed Mohammed al-Baradei as a representative for them. Would you encourage talks between al-Baradei and President Morsi?
Well, we've encouraged President Morsi and others to let democracy take place, to do this through, verbal conversations. I don't want to get ahead of where we are in the process, and we'll see how those conversations go.
And how worried is the United States that this could just degenerate into, quite serious clashes and bloodshed on the streets of Egyptian cities?
Well, certainly we're concerned anytime we see incidents of violence against women, against really any citizen. That's why we're monitoring it so closely and why we're in such close contact with counterparts at all levels.
Can I go back to the whole concept of the steps that the president encouraged President Morsi to take, and that the secretary encouraged the former minister to take? When you say that it is not correct, or that a report that says that you're calling for, or you're urging early elections or something, when you say that those are untrue, is it not the case that calling early elections is one thing, whether you're promoting it or not, is one thing that the opposition has been wanting, and that if President Morsi were to make a step in that appear favorable to that would be something that addresses at least some of the protesters' concerns?
Well,
is that not the case?
Well, Matt, the larger point here is that it's up to the Egyptian people to
understand
determine
that.
what the next steps are.
But surely you're not
and there
saying
there have been calls made from various sides here. My point is that it's not up to the U.S. To make that decision or make that call, and that call has not been made.
What? I'm sorry. What?
That
call?
the call for new elections, early elections.
Well, you say that. I think technically you're probably correct, but if the President of the United States calls the President of Egypt and says, "I'm encouraging you to take steps," surely among the menu of steps that there is for him to take are the things, at least some of the things, that the opposition has been calling for, and this is one of them. Can you deny that an early election is one of the demands of the
Matt,
protesters?
I know that the protesters have made demands. I don't speak on their behalf.
I know,
as you know.
but it's a bit duplicitous
and the White
for you
House
to say
gave,
that
let me just finish. The White House gave a pretty extensive readout of what the president's call was. I don't have anything to add to that, other than to say that there are steps that, of course, President Morsi can take. I outlined some of them in response to Joe's question.
I'm
but
just trying to figure out if you're saying if the administration thinks that early elections are not among the menu of things that Morsi could do to address the concerns of the protesters.
we're not going to make a judgment about the right steps. Of
I'm
course,
not
there
saying
are
it's
a
the
range
right
of steps.
step. All right,
Matt,
okay.
Matt,
And I just want you to concede that the protesters are calling for early elections, and that calling early elections would be one of several things out there that he could do to address their concerns.
Well,
is that
again,
correct or no? I mean, it seems to make a simple statement of fact.
Matt, I'm trying to answer your question, I promise.
I don't think you
There's
are.
a difference here between what the U.S. is calling for and what the U.S. is making
It
a
has
judgment on.
nothing to do
But we've
with-
seen the same reports you have about what the opposition and others have called for. That wasn't the original question that was being asked.
I'm trying to take it out of the realm of you telling him that this is a thing that you should do. I just want to know if the administration, in that menu of things, that could be done, that the opposition is calling for, you will allow that calling early elections is one of those things, correct?
Well, it is a call the opposition is making. It is not a judgment the U.S. is making about what the steps are.
I don't think anyone's saying that you have made that
Well, I
judgment,
just want to be
but-
absolutely
Okay.
clear
All
so
right.
that there isn't any confusion.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jill.
Not to belabor this too much, but there are some other steps as well that the U.S. apparently is urging him to take. One would be to appoint a new prime minister. Another one would be appoint a new cabinet, get rid of the prosecutor general. Those are three. What do you have specifically to say about those? Are those things that the U.S. does support?
I just don't have anything more specific on steps.
Changing subject.
Let's just finish any other Egypt.
Is there a point at which the United States would sanction the military intervention in Egypt, like if violence breaks out, if chaos becomes rampant in Egypt? Is there a point at which you will support the military intervention?
Again, Saeed, I think you're getting ahead of where we are, so I'm sure we'll be talking about this tomorrow again, and we'll see where we are.
More broadly, is there any consideration about US aid to the Morsi administration, given the fact that there are specific legal requirements on US giving aid to countries where there has been a coup? Is there any specific consideration going on at the moment about your aid?
You are right, there are, but that's not where we are in the process in terms of where things stand. And as you know, we would work with Congress and others on any steps like that. But again, that's a hypothetical at this point.
Because earlier this year, Secretary Kerry gave the authorization for the aid to continue. But there's no consideration or debate at the moment within his department or within the administration about cutting that aid.
Well, we're not there in the process. There's always broadly, so there's 2 points here. I think you asked one about in any country, in any case where there's a coup, right? There's a case, we're not there in Egypt, but there are ties to money, that's correct. Broadly in terms of aid, these are decisions that are made in part by Congress, in part by others, about what aid should go. But we talked about this a little bit a couple of weeks ago. A lot of aid does go both to strengthen the democracy in Egypt, both to help strengthen security. We have our own regional security needs. So there's a broad range of aid, but we're just not there at that point.
I have a technical question on just where was the secretary when he made this call? Was he on the plane? And if he was he in, where was he in between?
He was on the plane. He's en route back. I'd have to check the technicality of whether he was on the plane or at a refueling
All right.
stop.
And then the other thing is, where is Deputy Secretary Burns in Washington?
I'd have to check. I believe he is this afternoon
Was
back.
he this morning?
I'd have to check on his
Who
travel
represented-
plans.
Who represented the State Department at the Deputies Committee meeting on Egypt this morning at the White House?
Well, Matt, I don't know that we'd get into a list of attendees at such things, but if there's anything to share, I'm happy to share it. More specifically, any recent travel plans for the Deputy Secretary.
Changing subject.
Let's just see if there's any more on Egypt.
20.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Different levels of the official, and as as much as I remember, Secretary Kerry mentioned in one of his press conferences that he talked to Amr Moussa and Baradei. What was the message to them?
Well, again, the message is, across the board that, democracy takes time. He's encouraging all parties to work together. Beyond that, I just don't have. I know that was several days ago. I don't have much more of an update on it for you.
Secretary Kerry, in his appearance in the Congress, whether it's Senate or House, he was talking about two partners in Egypt, when one is the Morsi government and the other is the military. And it seems that in the last 24 hours, I mean, whether we like it or not, the big partner, or let's say the main player, one of the main players is the military. And then they make this ultimatum for 48 hours. I know you don't want to comment on the assumption what may happen or may not happen. What you are expecting, I mean, because at the end of the day, one of the President Morsi assistant, he said in an interview with Guardian and then with the New York Times, he mentioned the word that this is a military coup d'etat or coup, and it will not be passed. It's not going to be approved unless if it's approved by the Americans. He mentioned that as a quote. Do you have anything to say about that?
Again, I think we've been very clear here today, but also through the White House's readout of the president's call and through what I mentioned about the secretary's call, that our focus is on the Egyptian people and on ensuring their voices are heard. We're not going to get ahead of where we are in the process. And what we'd like to see is, of course, a peaceful, stable, and prosperous Egypt.
Question related to what Patrick said yesterday regarding the Ambassador Patterson and some Egyptian reaction was that why criticizing this and not criticizing the involvement of other Americans or the American factor in the other issues. What, do you have any comment on that?
Well, I think Patrick spoke to this yesterday, just in terms of conveying that, in the ambassador's complete comments, she made clear that we fully support Egypt's democratic transition and that we want the Egyptian people to fulfill their vision for their country. And we've made clear time and time again, including today, of course, that democracy requires compromise and concessions, and that's what our focus is on.
By law, sorry, excuse me.
Just a second. I mean, as much as I know it was announced on that Sunday and Monday, yesterday and day before yesterday, the American embassy was closed. Is it closed still today or not?
I'd have to get an update for you on that in terms of the status. It hasn't, I'm not aware of changes, but if there's an update, we'll get that around to everybody after the briefing. Dana?
Sorry, just to follow up on Joe's question, just for clarification, by law, the United States can't provide direct military aid, correct, to any country that has been taken over by a military coup?
I believe that's correct, but we'll get you, I'm sure we have a legal breakdown we can get to everybody, and as you all know, I'm not a lawyer, so we'll get that all around to all of you, and of course it's premature at this stage to speculate on that.
Hold on a second. I just want, you don't know, you don't have an update on the embassy status?
Oh, I meant to convey that I'm not aware of any change to what was discussed yesterday, but I'm happy to check on that as well.
Okay, because apparently they say they're going to be closed tomorrow.
Okay, I will. You
But
may
you
have
weren't
more of
aware
an
of that?
update than I
Okay.
do.
And then just broadly, is it a sign, does the administration believe it's a sign of a healthy democracy in, that a military, that an army would deliver an ultimatum to an elected civilian government?
Well, Matt,
Is that a good democratic thing, or is that a sign of a problem?
I think we feel that democracy takes time. You know the history here, that we've been at this for several hundred years. Egypt is relatively new in this whole process. Again, we're encouraging all sides to communicate and talk to each other and listen to the voices of the Egyptian people. But beyond that, I'm not going to make an evaluation.
But when a military, any military, threatens to intervene, somehow interrupt the rule of a legitimately democratically elected government, is that healthy? Is that a good thing for democracy?
I'll let you all do the analysis.
So, okay, so you can't say that threatening a coup is not is a bad thing,
Matt,
or is a case by case basis. I mean, maybe you prize stability in Egypt more than you prize democracy, and so this might not be so objectionable to you.
We prize stability and democracy, in fact. We're focused on taking this day by day, of course, and we are focused on making sure the voices of the Egyptian people are heard.
On that point, I'm sorry, but on that very point, you're saying that democracy takes time. Does that give margin for the military to intervene in this case?
Not at all what I was suggesting. I think we've been very clear on all sides that we're in touch with, and what our end goal is here.
Yeah, but you have a very clear principled position on against the interference by the military or military take over the government, correct?
I just don't have anything more for you on that site.
One more thing, just on the steps that the president encouraged. Are you saying that he's, because your colleagues at the White House right now are giving the same pushback on stuff that is out there? But are you saying that there were no specifics addressed by either the president or the secretary, or is it that there were specifics and you just don't want to get into them because they're part of the private diplomatic conversation?
Well, there's certainly discussions that are part of the private diplomatic process that we often talk about, but in the specific case of a call for early elections, I wanted to be clear on that point.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't have anything to add about other specifics, other than to broadly say that.
Well, could you say this? Does President Morsi, following the conversation that he had with President Obama, have an understanding of what the United States thinks might be helpful in this situation?
I mean, you'd have to talk to President Morsi about that, Matt. But I
Well,
think
I
we've
mean,
been
did the
clear,
president-
as was the president's readout, as have our public comments been on where we stand
But
and
you
our
can
view of
assure us
what's
that
happening.
President Morsi, if he listened carefully and understood everything that President Obama said, understands what the U.S. thinks would be best.
Well, I can't make a judgment for him, but I
Well, he
think
should,
we've been.
if he heard correctly and if he understood it all correctly, he has an idea of what the administration thinks might help resolve the situation.
Well, again,
Is that
Matt,
correct
I
or not?
appreciate the opportunity to make a guess on what he's thinking, but we've been very clear on what we think need to happen here.
Well,
So
actually, you haven't been very clear on what you think needs to happen. You've spent the entire 20 minutes so far refusing to be specific and refusing to be clear about what you think needs to happen. So,
okay. Go ahead, Joe.
If the embassy is closed on Wednesday, according to the security measures, it's going to be, would it necessarily be closed on Thursday for 4th of July as well? Are embassies closed?
I'd have to check on that specifically. I'm happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding one of the previous questions, you mentioned this phone conversation before you came here with the Egyptian foreign minister. I'm still puzzled. I mean, if somebody resigned and his role is to report to the president, I mean, I may ask him why he was doing that, but why the Secretary of State spent time to him to convey a message to somebody who's conveying to whom the message?
Well, you should
I'm just trying
communicate
to-
with him, and we can talk about it again tomorrow. Go ahead.
The U.S. ambassador in Cairo, she's still in Egypt, and I want to know if you have any worries about the safety of the U.S. embassy and the American diplomats.
I would have to check. I believe she is, as are a number of officials. And as you know, we monitor it very closely. The safety of our personnel, that's one of our top, if not top, priorities. And we always take steps as needed to make sure that they are safe. Sure. Oh, go ahead. One more on Egypt?
About the embassy.
Okay.
Are there any personnel evacuated for the embassy or the embassy?
I know that they've made a series of announcements. I'd have to check on the status of things, and we're happy to get that around to folks, depending on what we find out.
Region. I have a couple of questions. First of all, welcome back from India.
Oh, thank you. It was lovely there.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I did.
How did Secretary enjoy the India trip, and if a new chapter has been written in the U.S.-India relations, because this was his, of course, the first trip as Secretary of State, and where do we go from here?
Well, Goyle, I appreciate your question. I know the Secretary did enjoy every aspect of his visit. He had some very productive meetings as part of the India Strategic Dialogue. As you know, he also gave a speech there about the importance of climate change and elevating that as a global issue. And he even had the opportunity to go to the Lodi Gardens while it was hot out. He really enjoyed how beautiful and historic that site was. And as you know, India has been and will continue to be an important strategic partner. And I know he is grateful he was able to spend a couple of days there, and he's looking forward to continuing the positive relationship.
Secretary carrying any special message from the President for the Prime Minister of India about his visit to Washington?
Well, the Secretary, when he gets back from his trip, which is early tomorrow morning, I'm sure will be passing along to the President and the Vice President in the White House all about his discussions while he was there.
I may one more in the region. Secretary also met with the foreign minister of Pakistan, and there was a bombing in Pakistan also continuing, if they discussed that, and also if there was a discussion about Secretary's visit to India, about India-US relations or India-Pakistan relations, among other things.
Well, he did meet. I think you're referring to the secretary's meeting with the advisor to the prime minister. Yes, at ASEAN. So he did meet with him on the sidelines of the forum in Brunei. During the meeting, Secretary Kerry and Mr. Aziz highlighted the importance of the bilateral relationship and expressed the importance of continued close cooperation with Pakistan to facilitate an Afghan-led peace process, and they also discussed Pakistan's plans for accelerated economic reforms, particularly in the energy sector.
And anything on the continuing bombings in Pakistan still going on about terrorism?
Well, of course, we always condemn. We've seen reports of the numerous bombings this weekend resulting in the loss of many Pakistani lives. The United States stands with the people of Pakistan in condemning such senseless and inhumane acts. We offer our deepest condolences to the families of those killed and wish those injured a speedy recovery.
Can you bring us up to date on what your understanding is about the situation with Mr. Snowden in Moscow, and also bring us up to date on any contacts that you, the administration, may have had with governments in Europe about the weekend revelations?
Sure. I don't have much of a specific update here, which is no different than the last couple of days. You heard the President and the Secretary both say in the last 24 to 48 hours, I guess 24, that they're going to take a close look at the claims. I'm referring to your second question here. We work, as you all know, closely with our European counterparts on virtually every issue and have a long history of strong partnership, shared values, and friendship. In this case, we will respond appropriately to our partners through diplomatic channels, and of course that is ongoing.
Do you have any response to Snowden's claim in his statement last night that the US has been bullying countries not to grant him asylum? Specifically, he's talking about Ecuador, despite the president saying he wouldn't be engaging in diplomatic wheelie dealing. Do you have any response to that statement?
Well, we have of course seen the statement. As you know, Mr. Snowden has been lawfully charged in U.S. courts. He is, as a routine matter, and I know we've talked about this, but it's very relevant here. Persons with felony arrest warrants are subject to having their passport revoked. He remains a U.S. citizen. We welcome him back to the United States to face the charges against him in accordance with due process and U.S. law. But beyond that,
You very helpfully answered the second question I was going to ask, which is the other bit of his statement. But on the first claim, which is that the US has been twisting arms and, to use his words, bullying in contravention to what the president said he would do, is there no reaction at all? Is it not something you recognise as a characterisation?
I think I was just pretty clear on our reaction. I'm not sure what the basis for those particular claims would be.
The basis for the claim, he was clear. It was the Vice President's call to President Correa.
Well,
but I mean, twisting. I get it. All depends on where you're coming from. It is correct that the issue of Mr. Snowden came up in conversations between U.S. officials and Ecuadorian officials. Isn't that correct?
I think they've both made that clear.
Right. Exactly. So what one person might call arm twisting, the administration might call just the legitimate exercise of U.S. of the government trying to protect American national interests. But you would not deny that there have been conversations and discussions about Mr. Snowden, his whereabouts, and the consequences of
Matt,
hosting him.
I don't think we've at all denied that we've been in contact through a range of diplomatic channels.
All right, but you would just object to the characterization that it's bullying or arm twisting. That is correct? Yes.
I think that's clear.
Jen, there's a list now that WikiLeaks has of 21 countries so far that he has been at least publicly saying he would be interested in asylum in. Can you set us straight, what has the United States been, or the State Department been in touch with all of those countries? If so, what is the message?
Well, Jill, I'm not going to get into a list or specific country by country. We have been in touch, as we have been for several days now, with a broad range of countries that could serve as either transit spots or final destinations. And what we've been communicating is, of course, what we've been communicating publicly, that Mr. Snowden has been accused of leaking classified information. He is somebody that we would like to see returned to the United States, of course, and we are hopeful that that will happen.
Are you encouraged that asylum in Russia now is at least apparently off the table?
Again, I'm not going to speculate on different countries. Our focus here is on returning or communicating the reasons why Mr. Snowden should be returned to the United States and face charges here.
What gives you cause to be hopeful? You said we're hopeful that he will return to the United States. What gives you cause to be hopeful?
Well, I think that, Joe, we have to be in terms of focusing on communicating the reasons why he should be returned, our efforts to communicate with countries along those lines, and conveying why we feel it's important he's here. I don't have anything specific to report for you.
Nothing from the Russians on.
No, I don't have anything specific for you on that.
And there's been a suggestion. I mean, it might be a wild suggestion that he could actually leave Russia on the plane of Venezuelan President Maduro. What would the United States' response be to that if it happens?
It's again speculating on a hypothetical. Our focus is on returning him to the U.S. I'm not going to get into specific countries, just to say we've spoken with a range of countries, a broad range of countries that would either serve as a potential transit or final destination spot.
President Maduro and President Evo Morales of Bolivia said in Russia that they will entertain giving asylum to Mr. Snow.
Mm-hmm.
Your reaction to that?
I don't have anything specific for you. Our hope remains the same. We've been in touch again with a range of countries, and we would like to see him returned.
Correct, make sure I'm correct in thinking that you do not believe he has a case for political asylum in any country. Is that correct?
I mean, we're not going to make a judgment on behalf of other countries, but
no,
obviously.
No, you don't believe that he fears persecution rather than prosecution.
No, he would be tried as any
In
U.S. citizen would be,
in
and he remains a U.S. citizen.
Right. In other words, you don't think that he meets the standard for a person, and you're telling countries that might offer him asylum or might grant him asylum that you don't think that he would be eligible for it.
I'm not going to get into what we're communicating to different countries. Every country has their own laws, and I would refer you to any of them. I know many of them have been talked about publicly, but we have been very clear, and we feel the same way today, that he should be returned here. He would be tried as a U.S. citizen under the allegations he's been accused of.
Can you ask to see if you believe that if someone in his position were applying for asylum in the United States, if he would meet this U.S. standard for granting asylum?
It sounds like a lot of hypotheticals, but I will see if
well,
there's
I'm trying
anything
to
we
figure
have
out.
to add on that.
Look, if you make if the case you're making to these other countries is simply that he should be returned to the U.S., that's one thing. But if you're making the case to them that he does not meet the standard for for granting political asylum, then that's quite another thing.
I did not mean to convey what case we're making to countries. The case we're making publicly is what we're also making privately, that he is somebody who has been accused of leaking classified information. He remains a U.S. citizen. His right place is to be returned to the U.S. To be tried here.
Yeah, but do you understand the distinction I'm trying to... I want to know if the U.S. believes that he does not meet this...
I completely understand what you're asking, Matt. I'm not sure what we'll have to offer, but I'm happy to check into it for you.
Just because, I mean, there are plenty of people who are accused of serious crimes who come to the United States seeking asylum. Some of them are rejected, some of them are not. And I just want to know if you think that it would be inappropriate for another country to grant him political asylum because you believe he doesn't meet the criteria for a political asylee.
I understand what you're asking. I'm just not sure we're going to go down several hypotheticals.
Similarly,
Not hypothetical.
I've seen a couple of statements where he said that he fears the death sentence And what I'm not clear about is whether the charges against him actually would carry the death penalty.
I'm not aware that they would, but you would have to talk to the Department of Justice.
India has rejected Snowden's asylum request. Have they informed you about it, and what do you think about it?
I'm just not going to get into specific countries. I know there's a lot happening at one time, and again, we've just been communicating with a range of countries that could be both a stopover or a final destination.
Indians informed you or communicated with you?
I am
about
not
their
going to get
decision?
into specific private conversations.
Both President Maduro and President Morales, again in Russia, said that Mr. Snowden should have, is a hero, should have international protection. Your reaction to those comments?
I think we've been pretty clear on the fact that we believe that Mr. Snowden should be returned to the United States. He's been lawfully charged in U.S. courts, and I'll just stick with what we've said about him at this point in time. Jill?
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
NSA, I just want to get back, you said that there was, essentially, there's nothing new to report in your conversations with the Europeans about the,
I meant to say there's nothing new to read out, Matt. You know, this is
so
something
in other
where
words, there could be
we're
quite a
in-
lot happening, but you're just not prepared to talk about it.
Well, as you know,
about
the president and the secretary and
Yeah.
many members of the administration are in regular contact and will continue to be. But, you know, we work with our European partners on a range of issues very closely, and we'll keep those conversations through the appropriate
All right.
diplomatic
Well,
channels.
do you still hold the view that Patrick espoused here yesterday, that you share values, including privacy and freedom of speech and that type of thing with countries in Europe?
We do.
You do. So their complaints, you think, are without foundation?
Matt, we're having private conversations with the appropriate partners, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of those.
Just follow up on that. That question was in specific regard to European allies, but what about your other partners who are on that list? You know, with Snowden's leak on the NSA, have you been in contact with any of your non-European allies on that list?
We've been in touch with partners as appropriate around the world, and will continue to be. I'm not going to get into specific countries, though. Mm-hmm. Oh, Dana, did you have another one?
I just have a quick one
Okay.
on Snowden. It's just
And
a
then I'll
general
go.
question.
Sure.
Kind of speak to what Matt was asking, which is how in general does the United States respond to human rights activists or other leaders who say that the case of Snowden asking for political asylum is really no different than anyone else that's asking for political asylum who feels that they've been charged in their home country with crimes that are politically motivated?
Well, I would caution against me making a sweeping statement. There are different circumstances. As you know, the U.S., just as other countries, considers requests. I would point you to other countries for their consideration, and you know, we don't even typically get into specific requests and talking about them from here. Go ahead.
And the Secretary Kelly has any direct talk with North Korea officially or non-officially at the ASEAN ministerial meeting?
Well, as you know, there was a trilateral meeting to follow up, and there was also a meeting with an official from China to follow up on meetings that Glenn Davies had just a couple of weeks ago. Those conversations will continue, but our position on North Korea remains the same. We are committed to authentic and credible talks on denuclearization with our partners to implement the 2005 joint statement. North Korea knows what they need to do, which is to abide by their international obligations, and our position on that has not changed.
What do you think about the perspective of resumption of six-party talks? Do you think North Korea will come back to the six-party table, or they
I don't
reject
want to
it?
speculate on what they would or wouldn't do. The ball is in their court to take the steps that are necessary. We've been meeting, as the Secretary just met, with a couple of his counterparts in this that are members of the six-party talks, and our position remains, again, the same. Jill? Mm-hmm.
You know, there is a video on a Catholic website, quite gruesome, showing Syrian rebels beheading 3 people. Now, there was a report that one of them was a monk. Can you set us straight? Number one, do you have a response to that, or reaction to that video? Do you know who exactly they killed? And of course, the question is, how can the U.S. guarantee that money or any supply, I should say, supplies, arms for the opposition are not going to groups like this?
Well, let me first say I have not seen the video. I'm happy to take a close look at it and see if we can get all of you a response. I have
You'd
not
be
seen
happy to take a close look at a video showing someone being beheaded?
I'd be happy to get a response to everyone, Matt, so we can make sure you all can do the reporting to the American and global audiences you all report to. However, we have taken a number of steps. One of the reasons why the Secretary felt it was so important for military aid to go through the SMC is to make sure that it's going to moderate members of the coalition. That's been a priority. That's been something that he's been working with Congress on and has been encouraging our other partners around the world to do the same. Of course, any elements or any incidents, and we've been consistent on this, of this kind of violence we've condemned in Syria. But again, I'll take a closer look at this and connect with some of our experts on the issue.
Too. I note this morning that Secretary Kerry spoke in Brunei about looking more like sometime after August, and some people I've been talking to sort of say it's actually probably likely going to be September. Is that something that you can confirm?
Well, I don't have any confirmation of the dates, but I would just go back to, and those aren't, of course, set yet, otherwise you would know, that there are a number of factors that we've talked about that remain the case. So the situation on the ground, of course, the need for the opposition to elect leadership, which we're hopeful about, and the importance of doing this at the right time where the moment is ripe to bring all sides to the table. So it's never been, or it hasn't been, about a meeting, a deadline, but about doing it at the right time. And the meeting he had yesterday with the foreign minister built on the meetings that Ambassador Ford and Undersecretary Sherman had just last week, and they do feel they've made some progress in the planning stages of a conference.
There's no plan for them to meet again, Sherman and Ambassador Sherman. And
Not at this time, but again, the meeting yesterday was a follow-up to that. They're in close contact. We're in close contact with counterparts, and as needed to move the ball forward, I'm sure we'll continue those conversations.
And earlier this month, the White House took a decision that they were going to substantially step up their aid to the SMC, and it was going to be different from what we'd seen before. And has anything actually happened? Has there been any delivery of any such aid, or?
It's just not something I can provide an update on.
That suggests that there has been, but you're just not going to talk about it.
I just don't have any update on it for you, one way or the other.
Because again, I mean, from the region, we're hearing that they're not seeing anything going through at all, which has any kind of U.S. stamp on it in any. So was it just an empty promise that actually doesn't have any teeth?
Absolutely not. I can promise you the President and the Secretary don't make empty promises. This is something they're very committed to. And in addition to that aid, that again expanded the size and scope, but we just haven't been able to get into the details on any aspect of. There has been a significant amount of aid that has been flowing in that we've outlined from here. We know the situation on the ground is grave, and we've been encouraging. That's one of the reasons the Secretary and others have been encouraging our counterparts around the world to continue to provide aid of all kinds as well. But beyond that, I just don't have a specific update for you.
Yesterday, I'd asked Patrick two questions about some developments in the Bradley Manning trial, about the unclassified stipulation made by the State Department. Do you know was he or you or anyone in your shop able to prize an answer out as to whether the stipulation was intended to show that the cables, the 117 cables in it, were representative and of the damage, and has the release of these cables had caused damage to the U.S. national security?
I'm just not going to have an update on it from here. You may have already been in touch with the officials over at the Army. I would encourage you to reach out to them or have your colleagues reach out to them, but I don't have an update from here.
Does that mean that you think the appropriate place for my question to be answered is in the military court that's trying?
Again, it means that it's unlikely that the State Department will have a comment on this particular case.
Well, but it's your official, it's it's the
I
State
understand, but
Department stipulation, so
it's
you can't
an
speak to
ongoing case. There are lots of components of it. I
Right, okay, so
don't
let me
expect
just do
we're
a
going to
little
have an update
quick
on it.
recap from the most transparent administration in history. You won't tell us what you were asking for President Morsi to do or what you would like to see. The conversations that you have with countries involving Mr. Snowden are private and you can't talk about them. Your conversations with European allies and others about the NSA spying allegations are also private. You know, I don't know, how would you respond to someone who might say that it appears that the only privacy that this administration is interested in protecting is its own?
Look, Matt, I don't know that I have a substantive response for you here other than to say that some diplomatic conversations need to remain private. I understand the frustration, but you know, that's how the process can work best at times.
Bangladesh?
Bangladesh.
Yes, madam. Madam, since the Secretary was in the region and also meeting on the sidelines many foreign ministers and among other things, was there any discussion about Bangladesh, because thousands of families are on the streets and they are crying and asking the U.S. help because that was the only their livelihood. Those factories burned down and they have no place to go but to the U.S. companies dealing with those factories and also to the U.S. government.
Well, Goyal, I don't have any updates for you from the last couple of days. As you know, we are in close contact on a regular basis with our counterparts and are, of course, concerned by both the working conditions, which we've been focused on working with the Bangladeshi government on, and of course, the Bangladeshi people.
U.S. Embassy in Bangladesh also in touch with the local government?
As would be expected, but I don't have any specific updates for you.
Thank you.
Let's do just a few more here. Go ahead, in the back.
One China. I know you put out a media note this morning on the upcoming SNED.
Yep.
Do you have more information to share?
I don't. I'm sure as we get closer, we'll have more details about the program and what will take place next week. But it is happening next week, as we've long said. I believe it's Wednesday and Thursday, and Secretary Kerry and Secretary Liu will of course be leading the delegation.
And I know you have
In the most general sense, what the venue, I mean, will it be split between here and Treasury, or is it all going to be here?
It will be split, but we'll have a more a more specific breakdown logistically for you.
They mentioned in that statement just the opening, the stuff that will be open is the opening and the closing. Do you know where those, I mean, are those planned to be here? Do they plan to be at Treasury? I'm just trying to figure out, because we have a long weekend coming up.
I know you do, Matt. I'll have to double check that. We'll venture to get you guys something, if even for your planning on where things will be located in the next couple of days.
On SNED, can you say whether some groundwork was laid for that between the Chinese and American counterparts at ASEAN?
You know, as you know, the Secretary had a meeting there that I believe we did a readout of. And, you know, the groundwork has been building for these talks, and these are continuation of talks between the Chinese officials and U.S. officials. As you know, they had some meetings in California. The President led that. The Secretary was there. The Secretary was in China just a few months ago. And so I expect these will be a continuation of talks and conversations about a range of issues, from our economic partnership to cybersecurity to a range of issues that both sides care deeply about.
And if I can ask a question, a totally different region.
Sure.
During the Secretary's visit to Israel and talking with the Israelis and the Palestinians, how much of that was affected by what's going on in Egypt?
You know, the Secretary was there, as you know, for a couple of days, and he had intensive conversations with all parties. And you heard him say that we all made real progress on this trip and have a little more work to do. As you know, we have a couple of officials he left who are on the ground there. Several staff members are staying in the region to continue to work through these tough issues. That's Deputy Special Envoy Lowenstein and Jonathan Swartz from the Office of the Legal Advisor. They've continued those meetings. But the secretary was able to monitor and has continued to monitor, of course, closely the events in Egypt, just as he has been focused on what has been happening in Syria and what has been happening in a variety of issues that we're all facing globally around the world. He has regular phone conversations and receives regular briefings when he's traveling, even when he's in a different country.
I think I'm correct in that David Hale's last day as the special envoy, as George Mitchell's replacement, was last week. Is that correct?
I'd have to check on that, Matt.
So I'm just curious as to Frank Lowenstein's title. As you had deputy, is he going to become the full-on envoy? Or?
I don't have any personnel updates for you.
I don't think it's really a personnel update. I think it's just a question of title change. I'm just wondering if there's
I
going
don't
to be
have any
someone
title
stepping
change
in.
updates for you.
All right, and then the other thing is that, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but since you insist on repeating the secretary's line that he made real progress on this trip, can you point to one solid, tangible, public example that would back up that claim?
Well, Matt, I know you and Patrick had quite a fruitful
Yes.
conversation yesterday.
Yeah,
about
and I
this.
wasn't going to bring it up again, but since you continue to insist that real progress was made, and I continue to not see any sign of real progress being made, I bring it up again. So
Well,
here's
Matt,
your opportunity.
This is
Show me.
another one of those cases where the secretary believes, as many of the parties believe, that the best way to create the conditions for both parties going back to the table is for those talks and conversations to remain private. He also knows, as I'm sure all parties know, that this will be judged by the outcome. But I would again point you to what he said about how we couldn't risk not making an effort to put energy and put time and resources into this process. But I don't have any more updates for you or any readouts of private conversations to tell you
I'm not
about.
asking for private. I'm specifically saying public. The answer to my question is no. You cannot point to a single tangible piece of
Matt,
evidence that would
there
support
are-
your claim, the secretary's claim, that real progress was made.
Well, Matt, there are, he did leave several staff members on the ground. They're having some technical conversations. Beyond that, stay tuned.
So that's the sign? That's what you're pointing me to? The fact that Frank Lowenstein and some guy from the legal advisor's office stayed behind, that is a sign of progress.
He
Is
had
that-
long-
I just want to know, is that what you're pointing to?
That is what is happening as we speak, Matt.
But that is a sign
as
of
you know,
progress.
and I know your colleague was there, suffering in the vans as these meetings were happening. But these were lengthy meetings. They were
I'm
intense
sure they were, but
meetings.
having a lengthy meeting isn't a sign of real progress. I just want to make sure I understand that you're saying that that Frank Lowenstein and this guy from the legal advisor's office staying behind to follow up on his visit is a sign. That's
Well,
a sign
my
of
larger
real progress.
point, Matt, is about what the best path to creating the conditions to move to a path to peace would be, and the secretary believes that should be
All
through
right, I'm gonna take
private
that-
discussions.
I think I'm going to take that as a no, that you can't point me to one piece of evidence that.
Stay tuned, Matt. Stay
Jen,
tuned.
you might be keeping them private, but out of the region, they're not being quite so private. Has there been a decision to resume negotiations? Have the Israelis and Palestinians agreed to that?
I don't have any update for you on that.
And they're saying that Secretary Kerry presented a plan for negotiations to resume with a sort of 6 to 9 month kind of period within which you could sort of see whether there can be some kind of agreement.
There have been lots of reports out there, as we know, over the course of the last several months. I don't have any update or confirmation or anything along those lines of the next step here, just that we remain focused on it.
Back to India, please. If Secretary has invited the Foreign Minister of India to Washington before the Prime Minister of India comes.
I'm not aware of that invitation. I'm happy to check on it for you. Should we do one more here? Oh, go ahead.
Well,
Matt.
I just had this is a Treasury thing, I think, but I just want to know if there's a state component on it. The Treasury put sanctions on a Burmese general on a specially designated national list. Was there a State Department involvement in that?
I'd have to check on that. I believe that is Treasury, but if there's a state component, we'll get that.
I have one more
Okay.
on the Iraqi Kurdish parliament and where apparently fights broke out over the weekend as they decided to delay the presidential regional polls and for 2 years. I mean, not just 30 days or 60 days, but for 2 years, because they can't really agree whether Masoud Barzani should be allowed to change the constitution and stand again. I just wondered if there was a U.S. position on that.
I would just have to check with our Iraq folks on that for you and get you a response. I'm happy to do that.
One last
Sure.
quick Snowden follow-up.
Yep.
Just given that all the reports of various countries that he has applied for asylum from saying no, is it the Obama administration's position that Snowden is running out of options and that he is likely to be back on U.S. soil soon?
Again, I don't want to make a prediction, just to restate that, of course, that is our preference. Thanks, everyone.